Senator Roy Blunt, you were at homecoming at Mizzou this past Saturday, weren't you?
I was, and that was that's the day the AD gets credit for scheduling the right kind of homecoming game.
Yeah.
It was a great day. The weather was terrific, and, in the 100th homecoming at MU, it's great to have a big victory in a conference game.
We'll get back to sports before we finish things up and let you go this morning. But right now, let's talk about the victories that are happening in the Senate Appropriations Committee with this FY2012 legislation. This is the Ag Appropriations that you guys put through this week. Please explain to us what's going on with that.
Well, it's good news and bad news. Bad news is I'm in the minority, and we're spending a little more money than I'd want to spend. The good news is we're actually bringing an appropriations bill to the floor of the Senate for essentially the first time in 3 or 4 years. Now, the Senate hasn't passed a budget in over 900 days, the annually required budget. And without a budget, it's almost impossible to appropriate because you don't have any money. You don't have any numbers to say are the guidelines, so for years we've just been extending the prior year's appropriation with some changes. And so the good news is we're actually debating these bills, and we need to get back to having an open debate on how we're spending people's money and create an understanding that we have to get federal spending way back under control.
Before we talk about how much is being spent, what is it that's on your mind where we should be spending when it comes to agriculture?
Well, in agriculture, I'm a big advocate of agricultural research. When we founded the land-grant university system at about the time of the Civil War, it was founded on the idea that the federal government had a role to play in not having duplicative research all over the country, not having duplicative efforts all over the country, and that agriculture was the backbone of the American economy. And, still, Tom, in every state, including ours, and literally I think in every state, agriculture is the number one economic driver, whether you're talking about Rhode Island or Hawaii or Missouri. So ag research is one of my top priorities. That bill also funds the Food and Drug Administration, so the food and drug safety issues that the federal government has an important role in are there. And then we've got some money in the ag bill for disaster relief for all of the things that were impacted by the floods, particularly in Missouri this year, and some impact on other disasters, but most of that money would go to the 400,000 acres at one time that was underwater in our state this year because of flooding.
That's just incredible to hear that number, Roy. When we look at what happened this year, I mean, one of the things that you stepped up with, and this was a bipartisan committee put together of multiple states, to say, look, we can't let this happen again. Are we going to be able to see a time where it's not happening like that with the man-made allowing the flooding like that?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I had General McMahon, who's the general in charge of the Missouri River, from start to finish, from the start of the river to St. Louis through 7 states in my office yesterday. And I said, this is an opportunity where all 7 states, for the first time that anybody is aware of, all are on the same page of the priority of river management being flood control. And we had 400,000 acres is half the size of the state of Rhode Island. Now, it's not a big state, but it's a bigger state than anybody can quite imagine. Half of it being underwater, and half of that was probably underwater for 100 days. So from Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, we formed this Missouri River Working Group, and for the first time really ever, on the same page that the first priority has to truly be the first priority, flood control, and it can't just be at the top of the list as the first priority. The money and effort needs to match the list that we say is the priority of river management, and it's going to cost $1 billion to get the Missouri River levee system back into where it was a year ago. and they have about $27 million of that set aside. So the federal government, who's responsible for the Corps of Engineers, needs to come up with the rest of the money so they can do that job. You know, this is a time when we need to prioritize what the federal government does and, frankly, not get confused about what communities and states should be doing for themselves, like hiring police officers and teachers, so that the federal government can do things that states and communities can't do and aren't responsible for.
744, Roy Blunt is with us this morning. I know we only have you for a couple of more minutes. Let me shift gears and ask you about the passage of the free trade agreements with places like South Korea and Colombia and Panama. Well, how important is this, and how can it impact the economy in Missouri when it comes to jobs and our manufacturing?
Well, it's very good for our economy, and these trade agreements have been negotiated more than 3 years ago. Now, in fairness to the president, Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House, would not have allowed these agreements to pass, and so he really couldn't have sent them up the first 2 years he was president. But I'm sorry it took 9 months, but he got them up there, and I worked with the White House to try to get this done, you know, they've publicly given me quite a bit of credit for being willing to work with them to try in a bipartisan way to get these job-creating trade bills done. They're really good for Missouri. They're good for Missouri grain producers, beef producers, poultry producers, pork producers. They're really good for our state, and they're also good for our manufactured products. You know, as the Panama Canal opens up and to carry bigger loads, more and more manufactured products are going to come through the center of the country than ever before through the Panama Canal, rather than having to go to the West Coast to go to Korea. The EU negotiated an agreement after we did with South Korea. The first month of that agreement was July of this year. But they negotiated it later, but they got it approved sooner. Their year-over-year increase was about 37%.
Wow.
Once you got the tariff barrier removed, they sold 37% more product in South Korea in July of this year than they did last year. And South Koreans would rather buy American products. And so this agreement removes some of the barriers over, you know, the Missouri beef is better than the Australian beef. It's better than the New Zealand beef. And Koreans will buy it, I think, given the option of a fair marketplace, as well as they will manufactured products that say "Made in the United States of America" on them.
Mm-hmm. I think we're all...
Colombia and Panama as well. I don't want to leave them out. But Colombia has 50 million people, just like South Korea does. This is really important in this hemisphere to continue good trade relationships, make other kinds of good relationships, and we need to be thoughtful about the neighborhood we live in as well, and this trade agreement helps with that. And by the way, all the Colombian products that could come in have been coming into the United States without a tariff for years under the Andean Free Trade Agreement for free, without tariff. This is not about anything about Colombian labor or Colombian products. This is about whether our products made by American workers go into that country, and thank goodness now that's going to happen.
Roy Blunt, there are a lot of people listening to that right now. I think they're really, really happy to hear you talking about it and using some of the phrasings and the positioning statements you are on that, because we all feel that needs to happen. I know we need to let you go. One other question. Let's get back to the sports for a second. Is there a bet on the line that involves you and Claire McCaskill with the Senators from Texas?
Yeah, there is. I think if they won, they would really win this bet, because I think we're betting some Ted Drew's ice cream against some kind of Texas ice cream, and we don't expect to have to deliver. But if they do, if we do deliver, they're going to get a better thing than we're going to get from them.
I didn't even know they made ice cream in Texas. That doesn't even sound right.
I think it's Bluebell, isn't it?
Is that what it is, Bluebell?
Texas ice cream. Uh-huh.
All right. Well,
or something like that. But I think Senator McCaskill and I don't expect to have to deliver our ice cream, and we don't want to deliver it So those Cardinals need to win 3 more games.
Absolutely. Senator Roy Blunt, thanks for being with us this morning. Good luck with everything you're working on.
Hey, good to talk to you, Tom.
All right.